Welcome to this special edition of Business Live. My name is Sandra Sinam Apeno. The most topical and controversial issue in Ghana now is the Agyapa Royalties Deal. It's got civil society groups talking, politicians talking, and Ghanaians as well. But in all this, where did the country, Ghana, get it all wrong when it comes to issues of taxation, and what does this deal mean for Ghana? We have former Finance Minister Seth Terkper and also a tax expert to help us break the issues down. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, sir. First of all, the minority, which you are part of, have described this deal as not in the interest of Ghanaians and lack transparency. Why is the minority towing that line?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the first obvious reason, which has brought the nature of a tax haven, to light for many people, is the very fact that Ghana as a sovereign state has chosen to use a tax haven as a means of incorporating the company and doing much of the business underlying, the gold royalty. So I would say that this is the primary reason. The second, reason which some of us raised is that Ghana is already on a money laundering list. Usually they call it anti-money laundering by the EU. And the transaction going through a tax haven, would worsen things for the nation. And so when we spend a little time to describe what a tax haven is, then you would understand why we have these concerns.
For the layman, I want us to understand what tax haven means. Then we can appreciate the conversation.
Every citizen who earns income, whether from employment or from business or from investments, ordinarily you have to pay a tax unless Parliament exempts that tax. In the nature of international business in particular, we have non-residents or non-citizens coming into the country and investing, what we normally call foreign direct investments. Direct in the sense that they are not buying shares or treasury bills, which is paper, but they are bringing in money to mine your gold, to do exploration and get oil out of the ground, or they are bringing in money to set up a bank, to do various types of, business. So when they come in, they are also subject to tax because the income they are generating is from Ghana. Okay. Now, I'm narrowing in on international business because that is where the issue is. Now, what happens is that whilst you are taxing them, the country from which they came, because they are also citizens of that country, also wants to tax them. You are taxing them not because they are citizens. If you had a citizen rule, you won't tax them, but they would have taken your income. But you are saying, yes, you are not a citizen, but the source of the income is from Ghana. And so we have to tax it. Their country is saying, yes, the source of the income may not be from America or UK, but you are a resident, you are an American, and you must pay tax. So when this happens, if the two countries don't come to any agreement, it means that that income will be taxed twice. As a source from Ghana, by Ghana, and as, on a residence basis because you come from the country of origin where the money came from. So countries normally come together to try and say, okay, you can take part of the income and tax it. I can also take part of the income and tax it. And this is where countries sign what you call double taxation agreements. It happens that some of these companies establish their residence in countries that are called tax havens. Because the advanced countries tax on the basis of residence. Okay. They decide that they are moving away and they are going to incorporate. Remember, what you are taxing is an entity. Yes. Right? Because when it comes to companies, then it's an entity which now replaces the... So they go and incorporate the company in a tax haven. A country that says, you come and register, and as a resident company, instead of you paying 25% in Ghana, you can pay us only 5%. You see where the problem is? Yes. And so the base of the income and the profits now shifts to a tax haven. So they no longer declare taxes, you know, in the country of residence, but in those tax havens. Okay. And then a citizen, just a minute, even a citizen who earns income in Ghana may decide to go and have residence in that country, some even citizenship. Right, so they are no longer residents. Their income is not deemed to have come on a residence basis. Right, so both advanced and developing and other countries started going after these tax havens because they are just providing comfort. And recently, you may have heard some time ago, Ireland, some agreement being reached. France recently with Facebook and other, you know. So this is the problem. So when you are a country which is perceived to be allowing countries to use, companies to use your country, then you are blacklisted.
Okay, so that's what I was coming to. I wanted to look at the likely impact for choosing this path, and then why we will be blacklisted as a nation for choosing that option.
You are blacklisted because, you know, the advanced countries are Muslim. And that's where the investments come from. So when they blacklist a company, either they require more disclosure of information when you are going to invest in that country to make sure that you are not using that country as a conduit, right? Or they ban the country, their citizens, from even investing in those countries, right? By the way, we are talking about genuine business here. But another concern is money laundering, right? Where you have dealings in drugs, you have dealings in, you know, various things, which some of which are, you know, illegal, right? And for which you could be punished if you bring drugs into many countries. You know, for some even it's death penalty. We know some. You could go to prison and all that. But you can't go, if the activity is banned, smuggling is banned, you can't go to GRA and say, I got my money, you know, from smuggling and from trafficking illicit drugs. Right, there's a tax rule that says that it doesn't matter the income, right? It doesn't matter the income, we'll tax it. Yeah. Right? The GRA is obliged to inform the security agencies after they've collected their money. Right. So money laundering means it's dirty money, and some of these countries accept that dirty money. So like a laundry, that's where the expression comes from. You take your dirty clothes to those countries and then it comes out clean, because then you register as having done some investments in real estate. You know, what they do is that they get those monies, you know, and then people invest in real estate and things in those countries. And of course, then you come to Ghana and you say the source of my income is not drugs, but it is real estate. The money has been laundered, like a laundry in that fashion.
Okay,
so again, countries track this activity, right, and they punish it. And that's where the anti-money laundering rules. So if your country, remember, it may not be the income per se, but sometimes your country may be the conduit for, say, smuggling drugs to, say, the advanced countries where maybe the price is high and the rest. And so as they track, and even your country becomes a conduit for the drugs going into, that, tax haven, before it is laundered, then you become part of the problem.
Okay, so clearly, choosing this path, going for a tax haven exposes the country to a lot of risk. Being blacklisted, for instance, is one of the issues you spoke about. But what signal does it send to the international community? And do we still remain attractive for investors when we know that clearly with this path we are taking with this deal could expose them as well, the risk involved?
First of all, let's see the source of the risk and why some of us say that the risk is being, likely to, the current transaction is likely to enhance it. Ghana was placed on a money laundering watch in May. The implementation date is October, within a month. Okay, government has said that they were taking steps, to make sure that this does not happen. When you are on anti-money laundering, list, the next step could be blacklisting. Okay, so we'll come to why you're talking about blacklisting, the consequence. So, and what that means is that you have to make sure you stop that activity. Maybe your citizens or others are using your country as a route to do these things. So you have to stop, either for tax reasons, as we said, or for shady, transactions. That's the two we've covered so far. So it can be genuine money, which is finding a way of paying less taxes. The income is genuine, the business done in Ghana, everything is genuine, but only it is not being claimed to come from Ghana, but it's coming from somebody who is offering, or it can be completely illicit, as we have explained. Okay, so the problem for Ghana is that since money laundering often involves tax havens, you are sending a bad signal to the OECD or the EU, which is about to put you on a blacklist. This time, not because your citizens or other non-citizens are using, but the sovereign itself, right, wants to do investments and it is going to use a tax haven.
So having said that, what do you think is the motivation for government to go this way?
Well, the reasons were given, particularly yesterday's conference, which explained that lesser taxes will be paid and the country will get more, income. But that's the precise reason.
And you think we got it wrong as a nation?
Yes. Why? Because one of the highest forms of training, even when you are qualified as an accountant and you join, or a financial expert and you join GRA, is training to trace the avoidance of tax. Evasion, obviously, is illegal. But avoidance sometimes is somebody who can look at your laws and exploit loopholes, right? So, remember I spoke about multinationals, right? So a multinational, another form in which they take money away, they may decide to pay you on a source basis. The source is from Ghana. So yes, I'm paying you, I acknowledge, and I'll pay you the tax on the source coming out, except that they bring a manager, who will be paid, let's say, some, a high amount of money. They say the headquarters is rendering services, and this all become expenses. So in the end, they have acknowledged, but they are paying less tax because they are inflating the expenses. against which the income has to be. So as I was explaining, one of the highest form of training is tax experts or tax officials, tax employees, who by the nature of their training, say an accountant or economist or whatever, are able to trace these transactions.
The issue of, the impact and the signal it sends to businesses and companies. Do you think that as a government, a sovereign state like Ghana, choosing to go into a tax haven will send a signal to companies, or we have the moral right to go after companies for taxation?
That's the issue. You are sending a back signal because you are making GRA go after businesses.
Right.
That are using tax havens and things as a conduit for taking. And here we have the state itself
running away from.
Yeah, just for the sake of a few, as explained, tax savings that we would make. We want to register in a tax haven. The same reason that a multinational would give for investing in a tax haven and not wanting, say, I'm not resident, and wanting you to. So that's why I said it seems to undermine the very essence of tax treaties, the very essence of training officials for many years to understand the nature of transactions and paying them, because those are not, if GRA is paying an accountant and others, it's a lot of money, because otherwise they will go to the private sector, work for this. So that is the, but there's also an argument about the vehicles that are being used, which the vehicles for the investments, which is Agyapa and, to some extent, mineral income investment and others. Yeah, there is some controversy now about those also. But
government has argued that those contracts were awarded based on competence, but not because they have some sort of affiliations with government officials or the president's
conflict of interest issue at all.
Which one are you referring to?
What I'm referring to is whether you need 4 or maybe 5 companies to handle mineral royalties. Right? So you have the Mineral Development Fund, which takes the royalty, and then it passes it on to a Mineral Income Investment Fund. Nothing wrong with that, because it's similar to the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, right? But that's where the comparison ends. Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, when it wanted to invest in Terminal 3 and later another, as anticipated, did not need, a tax haven to invest. It didn't go through that, right? But here you have, beyond that, you have Agyapa, right, which has also employed fund managers, and which has transpired that even though we are arguing that the first 3 companies are for Ghana, 100%, right, it's transpired now that fund managers, that's those who help float shares. Again, nothing wrong with that, because when we do, remember that the activities being described, they are not as, we are using them already. We use, after all, we use fund managers to float our sovereign bond. The same stock exchanges, which are being, so what's so special, right? Of course, some financial arrangements can be complex and therefore they are special, right? So, but here we are being told that instead of a straight fee of say 2% or 2.5, there's an interest of 49% going to fund managers. So yes, I may own the company, right? And 100%, but it is 100% of 51, not 100% of 100.
All right. Government said, or they've said that the proceeds of this gold mineral royalties will be invested in education, health, infrastructure. And some have argued that we have infrastructure investment fund that has already been established that you could go into it. Why should we use our minerals royalties for that? What do you make of that argument?
It is for this reason actually that we were seen to have hesitated in setting up a minerals investment fund. We were looking at the pros and cons of having 2 or more investment vehicles as opposed to 1. Many countries use 1. And when you would use 1, because you consolidate all the incomes coming from 1, from various sources, you have the muscle to do more and bigger business, right? And so that's where most people are coming and saying, why make things complex for ourselves? Why don't we just use 1, which is the Ghana Infrastructure Investments, fund. But another argument is a commitment argument, because the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund was established with 2 sources of income. The first one is either 15 or 25% of ABFA, when there was concern from PIAC and others that which seems to be spreading the oil revenue too thinly, and we are not seeing substantive projects. So the Infrastructure Investment Fund was established. Yes, it was all related to take a portion of the ABFA that goes into capital projects. 70% of the ABFA must go into capital projects. Take 25% or 15%, 10% of that, and put it in an investment vehicle that would invest in bigger projects. But it's not just the direct investments. The notion is that if Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund is receiving 100, and to some extent that argument is being given for royalties, $100 million every year from, let's say from oil, right? It can look at the 100 million as a flow which will come for 10 years every year, or for 5 years. So it can borrow 500 million and do a project, right? And then use the 100 million to pay. But if you invest that in a commercial project immediately, and the project is finished within a year or 2, that project will also contribute to the repayment of the loan, in addition to the oil revenue. And this is how sovereign wealth funds are created, to do big developments like Dubai, So it's their sovereign wealth fund that actually does most of the investments. And that's what we're following, right? Now the commitment question comes in that from 2017, okay, the second source is the VAT. When the VAT was increased from 15% to 17.5%, the entire 2.5% was to go to the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, because that money would have been part of the capital budget. So again, like the ABFA, part of the capital budget is being taken for this vehicle to invest in major projects, which like so they would have invested, if you like, in Bui Dam, in let's say Kosomo Dam in the past if we had it, right? Their first investment was to be part of Terminal 3, right? So they are part of the ownership of Terminal 3, and then they were to do Terminal
3. I know it's another conversation that we'll be having.
So to wind up, what I'm saying is that the arguments are 2. Why not use 1? And then the second is, since 2017, you haven't paid either the share of ABFA or the share of VAT into the Infrastructure Investment Fund. So what is this education about commitment and doing investments, and when you have not shown that commitment? In fact, the investments that were made recently from Infrastructure Investment Fund were from monies that were put from these 2 sources earlier. And in 2014, I believe, when we did a sovereign bond, we didn't put everything to support the budget. We put $250 million as seed capital, for the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund to take off. So those are the funds. So rather like the stabilization fund, which is also meant to stabilize the budget, the $250 million that was taken, again, with 3 oil fields, we didn't put in as much. If we had put in as much, we would have borrowed less than $1 billion from the IMF, because you would have had your own 500. Because $250 million which we borrowed, right, is 1/4 of the $1 billion that we got from the IMF.
Okay.
Yes. And that's how you win yourself from the IMF. That's how you exit the IMF. When you establish these instruments and you are capable. So when there's a crisis, a major one like this, like COVID, we all know it's severe. That one you can go to the fund. But when you have milder ones, like some of what we have had in the past, drought, Akosomo Dam and other, and remember we were informed by Dumso in putting many of these things in place. So when there's disruption in gas supply from Nigeria, you can go into your stabilization fund, which you establish when times were good, and you use when times, are bad. But there was no commitment to it.
Finally, before we go, I mean, this deal has been approved by Parliament already. Civil society groups have been talking. Minority, your side, you've also been speaking. Where does this leave us? Yeah, where does this leave us? And is this one of those things that, yes, we see Parliament pass a deal or government has taken a decision, we come and make noise around it, and that ends it? What's the way forward now, government?
Well, I can only cite my flag bearer who says that at the time he spoke, remember, at the time he spoke, one of the issues that came up was non-disclosure. Under Article 1815, you're supposed, if you are setting up a vehicle to go and borrow, Parliament is to approve the terms and conditions for the loan, the structure that is being used. None of those documents were provided. But for the enhanced disclosure rules in London, where you can go to the website and we wouldn't have known if it were a private, deal, or if the BEPS and others had not compared. Remember we spoke about BEPS. If the Advanced Council had not used BEPS rules to force tax havens to put some of this information and things, I would never have known. Just as to date, we don't know about the terms and conditions for the domestic bond that was made in 2017, right? So that is another angle. And he has said at the time, the flag bearer, that the former president, that to the extent that these things are not clear, we would review it.
So
that is
his position is that when government, when the NDC returns to power, we don't recognize.
Well, we now have some information, so I believe that the issue will be laid to rest. If Parliament comes in October, as I understand it will come because the budget cannot be prepared to approve the 3 months, and the information can be given to Parliament, and we are satisfied beyond what happened yesterday, then probably there will be no need.
Mr. Terkper, I want to say thank you. Let's do the sign. Thank you so much. So that will be our program for today. I hope you understood the tax issues, a bit complicated, but he managed to break it down for us. And as to whether government should go ahead with this deal is another thing we are waiting to see. Thanks so much for joining us.